All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Saturday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great weekend so far. We got a jam-packed show for you today. I'm hitting all three games from the Friday night slate. As I said, I had a personal matter last night, so we couldn't cover them live. Covering them today. Then we're going to be coming back live on YouTube later tonight after the final buzzer of Denver Nuggets versus the Los Angeles Lakers to hit 4 additional games. So we're going to have 7 game breakdowns today. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And keep leaving mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We're going to hit a couple mailbags a week over the course of the rest of the postseason. And then last but not least, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about Game Time. I know that the NBA is a great television product, but nothing beats watching true high-stakes basketball in person. And there's not a better time to go out and see an NBA game with the type of talent that we have, not just the changing of the guard that we're witnessing, as it looks like LeBron, KD, and Steph are going to be out sooner than we would have expected coming into the season, but also just this incredible slate of new young stars in the NBA. Man, Anthony Edwards, I got to get out and see him in person. What a show he put on again in Game 3 last night. But Game Time just has an amazing ticket buying experience. They have all-in pricing, so you don't have to worry about going to check out and getting surprised by how much you're paying. They have a very simple checkout process. You can check out in as few as 2 taps. And you can also get a really good view of what your seat's going to look like before you actually pay for the ticket, so you don't have any surprises when you get to the arena. Also, a couple of other things. They have exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with zone deals, this is really cool. You pick the section. Game Time picks the seats for you within that section for big time savings. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code HOOPS. That's HOOPS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk some basketball. So we're going to start with Wolves-Suns, and we'll work our way backwards throughout the day. So obviously, more Timberwolves dominance in Game 3. Different from the first 2 games. Like Game 1 and 2 kind of felt more like they were competitive throughout, and then Minnesota pulled away late. This was different. Minnesota built an early 9-point lead, and they kind of just stiff-armed the Suns the rest of the way, and then really put them away in that end of the third quarter run. You can tell it's been a consistent theme in this series. Like Phoenix really starts to wear down physically under the athletic onslaught of Minnesota and start to fade late in games. I thought that Karl Anthony Towns was a huge early boost in this game to kind of change the dynamic mentally of the game. He hit a couple threes. They lost him in transition once, and then he had a pick and pop 3, and then he had a pick and pop driving layup, did some damage in that pick and pop at the top of the key. But those early buckets from Cat, they put the Wolves up by 9, and they just completely changed the dynamic of the game. The crowd got super tense and nervous. The Suns players were playing super tense and nervous, and that just kind of changed that dynamic, and they never really ceded control from there, you know? Similar stuff to the rest of the series. Lots of ball pressure, lots of physicality, not letting anyone feel comfortable. Jaden McDaniels has just done an unbelievable job on Devin Booker. About a month and a half ago, I went on Twitter and said that I thought Jaden McDaniels was the best perimeter defender in the league. It was after a game against the Los Angeles Clippers. In this like possession I watched where he guarded like every single Clipper on the same possession and just locked all of them up, just like switching and just being all over the place. And a lot of people pushed back and said that they disagreed, that they thought he fouled too much and all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure the increased physicality of this postseason, not just relative to the regular season, but relative to the rest of NBA playoff games that I've been seeing in my time covering the league, I think that's helped Jaden and allow him to be physical, but he's just done an unbelievable job and has completely mitigated that top end that we know that Booker can get to. And again, that's the thing. Like, he's going to get his 23 points and his 8 assists because Devin Booker is one of the 15 best players in the world, and he's capable of manufacturing production against elite defensive players, but you're stopping that top end. I talk about that all the time. We act like it's like just a crapshoot in terms of whether a guy's going to go for 43 or 23. No, that's not the case. Usually it has a lot more to do with the defense than it does with shot result. Anthony Edwards was incredible. He had 36 points, a bunch of really tough tough pull-up jumpers and floaters that kind of were like rescue possessions that sucked the life out of the crowd. But I thought the story of the game for him was his dribble penetration. He just did an amazing job pressuring the rim and beating people off the dribble consistently throughout the game. The unsung hero of this game, though, in my opinion, was Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He had a scoring run in the third quarter, early third quarter, that really changed the dynamic of the game. Started with a pull-up three and a ball screen. I shouldn't say early third quarter, it was middle third quarter. But it started with a pull-up three and a ball screen on the right wing where his man ducked underneath the pick, just rose up and knocked it down. Then he had a driving a driving drop-off and one to Rudy where he faced a high drop and he dragged the drop coverage big and his on-ball guy underneath the basket and threw a really nice lefty drop-off pass to Rudy Gobert for a dunk. Hit a couple of corner threes in that stretch as well. You could tell it was one of those things. One of my favorite things when I'm watching a basketball player, especially a younger basketball player that's starting to have initial success in the league. And make no mistake, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, this role he has with Minnesota is the first role he's like really thrived in compared to, the way he was utilized when he was in New Orleans, right? So like this, honestly, it's always been a favorite thing of mine to see a player watch his hard work come to fruition. And like you could just tell when he had that drop off pass to Rudy, he was stomping on the ground and screaming because it's his hard work that's coming to fruition in a big moment in the postseason. I thought he built the margin that made the game feel over. Because once the Wolves went up 9 in the early portion of the game, it was kind of back and forth a little bit. It'd be like the Suns would get it down to 6, and then the Wolves would push it back up, and then it'd be back and forth. It wasn't until that Nickeil Alexander-Walker run in the third quarter that it really started to feel like the Suns were going to lose this game. I thought that was a huge sequence there. So Wolves go up 3-0. NBA history tells us this series is over. Actually, before I move on to this, I wanted to hit one other thing. So Anthony Edwards, there's an and one on the far end of the court, and Anthony Edwards starts doing his celebration, right? And first of all, shout out to Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant got a lot of questions after this game that, were tough questions that a leader has to answer after a tough playoff loss. And I thought he handled everything with an incredible amount of professionalism, just in terms of talking about how he still believes in that it's a confident group and that they're going to go into game 4 intending to win. And when he was asked about Anthony Edwards in the celebration, he's like, hey, man, you win the game, you get to do whatever you want. And all I could think is like, that's just a winner's mentality. That's exactly what you need from a leader. So shout out to Kevin Durant. But Anthony Edwards, I was texting some of my buddies. I have a group chat with my men's league team, the guys that we play on Sunday. And we were talking about this morning. But like I've been super down on this era of American basketball players, right? Like it's just been, that's the real sad part about Steph and KD and LeBron potentially phasing out of the league is like there's just not a great next generation of American stars. That's why the Giannis's and the Jokic's and the Lukas and the Embiids are like basically pulling away at the top of the league, right? But like Ant gives me hope. It gives me hope, man. Not just the ability that he has, but also just the mentality that he has. He wants to kill everybody. He wants to be the best player in the league. And he's the one guy that I see from the American group. I don't think Tatum has it. I don't think Tatum is capable of surpassing the Jokic, Luka, Giannis, and Embiid tier. I don't think he's got that upside. Ant has that upside. Ant can be better than those guys. That's something that is a unique capability that he has, and he might be the guy that rescues this American generation, because we do not have a lot of really good basketball players coming out from that group of years there, the guys that are in that age 20 to 25 type of group. So anyway, let's move on to kind of looking forward. So NBA history tells us this series is over, right? No team in the history of the leagues come back from down 3-0. So quick look ahead for both teams. For the Wolves, I was just wrong about this series. I admitted I was wrong after game 2. I'm not going to get into the excruciating detail of that because I went over it in the mailbag episode the other day. So go back, I think 2 days ago, right after game 2, and you'll find I did a film breakdown and then a mailbag of the Wolves-Suns series. And in that mailbag, I talked about why I was wrong about the Wolves, things along those lines. So and also I kind of addressed the idea of the these predictions that I make in the postseason and what they really mean. So just make sure you go back and check that out if you're looking for an explanation for how I feel in light of being wrong about the Wolves. We knew their defense was great, but the main thing that I was wrong about was their offense. In the regular season, they were a 99.8 offensive rating in the half court. They're at 102.3 in the playoffs so far, which is the 5th best among playoff teams. Anthony Edwards is shooting 43% on pull-up jump shots. That's been a big part of it. 50% in effective field goal percentage. This is the 3rd straight year where in the regular season he's been well below a point per possession in pull-up jump shooting, and then he's been above a point per possession when we get to the postseason. So something about that increased physicality and intensity. He just gets the lift he needs to knock, the lift and separation he needs to knock these shots down. His shot creation has been excellent. He's run 93 pick and rolls, post-ups, and ISOs, including passes, generated 97 points out of them. That's 1.04 points per possession. That's awesome. 19 assists in the series. That's over 6 per game. So he's addressed his weaknesses in a major way in this series. I put in my notes, he passed this test with flying colors. This big test, a team that had a good game plan for him in the regular season and really gave him issues, and he just kicked their ass and kicked their ass against the exact same types of coverages and situations that he was seeing in the regular season. Mike Conley stepped up in his scoring like they needed him to. He only scored over 15 points 20 times in his 76-game regular season, and he had 15 and 18 in the last 2. I thought that was big in terms of just kind of doing what he had to do to beat the coverage. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Karl Anthony Towns have both given big offensive stretches. They haven't had the big scoring volume, but they've had stretches where they've made plays. I talked about Cat in Game 3 at the beginning of the game, kind of changing the tone of the game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker pulling away there in that third quarter stretch, right? And then the other thing, too, is they've avoided the clutch situations entirely. That was their biggest weakness. They're a really bad clutch offense and clutch defense during the regular season. Now, I expect their defense to hold up better, but they were really bad clutch offense in the regular season. They haven't had to deal with that yet. Now, Denver's going to be a really big challenge, but I take Minnesota much more seriously in that matchup than I would have a week ago. And we will do a full series preview of Denver versus Minnesota once both of those series go final. On the Suns front, I was just wrong about this team. It's funny, coming into the final few weeks of the season, I had them at 3rd on my list of contenders. And then I changed my mind after a couple of really ugly games where they really struggled under a physical onslaught. And that caused me to drop them from 3 to 5. And it's interesting because I should have probably dropped them further, because that specific thing that gave me concern about them when teams would punch them in the mouth physically and they would wilt. I identified that, and I just think I underaccounted for it. So I was really wrong with them. I was too willing to ignore the wilting in physical games and their struggles with ball pressure and turnovers, and I was too willing to buy into their drive and kick attack, which they just never were able to get going in this series. So it's abundantly clear that the Suns have too many redundancies. The Wolves exposed the Suns' 3-star build as redundant. If you bring ball pressure and physicality, you can keep their scoring volume and efficiency down. And on the other end, they're just not a very athletic team. And you saw that huge gap in athleticism when Minnesota was on offense in this series. The Wolves have been a mediocre offense all year, and the Suns just couldn't stop their athletic perimeter players and even their forwards like Cat from getting to their spots, especially when the physical environment was factored in. Even just Jaden McDaniels, just on all of his rip throughs on closeouts against Kevin Durant, they're just getting to spots so easy because of how athletic they are. And I do think that the league kind of upping the physicality at the end of the season was something that played into Minnesota's advantage. So here's the thing. It's hard to say where the Suns can go from here. They're not in a great position to improve on the margins. They might have no choice but to flip one of the stars for real two-way depth. You have to kind of read the room, right? And if you read the room, you can see the league is getting more physical. You're watching Minnesota cause problems for teams with their physical defense. You're watching Denver cause problems for teams with their imposing size, right? You're watching teams like Oklahoma City with elite perimeter defenders just put CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram in jail. Right? We're watching that win. So you have to read the room. And it's just a poor use of resources to have 3 players like Beal, Durant, and Booker that are so redundant. And unfortunately, finding like the perfect star for star trade is difficult. So you might have to look at this in terms of picking two of the stars that you believe are best to build around and using one of them as an asset to bring multiple tough-minded, high IQ, athletic, two-way role players. That might be the direction they have to go. I'm not going to, just because of how busy we are today, because I've got these 3 games and then I've got to cover 4 more later today, I'm not going to give you guys any options right now, but we'll come up with some options at a later date. I'll kind of canvass the league and see if there are some options that make sense. But the reality is they're in some trouble. The league is pivoting towards physicality, and athletic tools are becoming more valuable, and this team just is not very athletic. The 82-game preseason is in the books, and now it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. The Boston Celtics are currently the favorite at plus 160, but the team that's third in my championship rankings, the Dallas Mavericks, you can get them on DraftKings right now at plus 1,600 to win the title. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code HOOPS, HOOPS, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, moving on to Clippers-Mavs. This is a really weird game because most of the stars played poorly. Like, James Harden had a heater that he hit in the late first quarter. Started with a step-back 3 at the end of the first quarter. Then he hit a couple more threes to start the second quarter. That gave the Clippers a little bit of a lead. That was like Harden's little hot streak. And then Kyrie Irving caught a heater that was at the end of the third quarter and the early fourth quarter. That basically iced the game for the Mavs. But outside of that, all the stars played poorly. Kawhi was bad. He's clearly just hurt, and he's not able to get to his spots, and he's not able to get lift. Paul George was just abysmal. He had 7 points. Shot selection is the big thing for him. I'm watching him take these incredibly difficult step-back contested long twos or contested threes early in the shot clock, just not playing within the flow and using, again, I talk about that all the time. Rescue possessions, coverage beaters, end of game situations. That's when you lean on tough shot making. Just the one other exception I would use is okay, you've made 2 or 3 in a row and it's like a heat check type of thing. But outside of those 4 situations, you really shouldn't. Rescue possessions, 4 or 5 seconds left on the shot clock. Look to go to your dribble package and make a tough shot, right? Coverage beaters. That means you're in a ball screen and the guy ducks underneath the pick. Yeah, you need to take the pull-up 3. You go off a ball screen, they're in a deep drop and your defender got caught on the screen. Yeah, you might want to look at a pull-up 2 in the mid-range there as you're getting downhill, right? I'm not saying that those don't play a role. Late game situations, obviously, more switching, more physicality. A lot of the times the in the flow stuff stops working. And then on a heat check, yeah, a contested shot is a higher percentage shot. But outside of those situations, it doesn't really make sense to go take a multiple dribble combination, difficult pull-up jump shot. And Paul George just actively hunts them. And again, it's one of those things where it's you're already out of rhythm and you're trying to get in rhythm, but you're trying to get in rhythm that on your best day, you might make that shot 30% of the time. Those really tough ones, right? When a guy goes 50, 40, 90, who's a 3-level scorer, it's not because he's shooting 50% on tough contested 2s and 40% on tough contested 3s. No, he's getting a lot of easy shots that he's shooting over 50% on and easy catch and shoot 3s that he's shooting over 40% on. Then he's shooting in the mid-30s and mid-40s on the tougher contested ones, and that's pulling the averages down. And so when you build your shot selection around that, it becomes an issue. Luka was bad in this game. He was 7 for 25 from the. I shouldn't say bad. He was good defensively, but he was bad offensively in this game. He was 7 for 25 from the field. He was 5 for 19 on pull-up jumpers. Just kept taking them, and you could tell he was out of rhythm. He had some bad misses too. So credit to the Clippers defenders. I thought Russell Westbrook did a really, really good job on Luka with his back pressure, just kind of relentlessly pursuing him from behind. Terrence Mann did a really good job as well. Shout out both of those guys. I thought they set the tone and played a big role in Luka having a tough night. Every perimeter defender for Dallas did an amazing job. PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., Dante Exum, Josh Green, everyone did a great job. They forced the Clippers into 19 turnovers. They scored 29 points off of those turnovers. That basically was the difference in the game, by the way, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that when we take a zoom out view of the series here at 2-1. I thought Gafford was amazing. He only had 8 points and 4 rebounds in 26 minutes, but he came out the gates just with his hair on fire, just flying around everywhere as an athlete. His vertical spacing was big. Dallas could not get the lob game going in the first 2 games. Really got it going with Gafford and Lively in this particular game. Gafford was active on the offensive glass, and then he was just everywhere defensively. He had 3 blocks and 2 steals. A massive, momentous block of Paul George on a dunk attempt in the second half where he was kind of out of position and on funky footwork, just somehow elevated and met Paul George at the top. I think he got it with his left hand, too, if I remember correctly. Dallas played most of the game with the center on the floor, which I thought was interesting because they leaned more into small ball, especially in game 2. And I thought that was the right call from Jason Kidd with how well they were playing. And again, like those are going to be the reads he has to take. On nights where Gafford and Lively are contributing, you can lean into them. And maybe it'll be a road at home thing. Maybe it's one of those things where Gafford and Lively will play better at home. We'll see how it goes as we look forward. So kind of zooming out at the series, I still think the Clippers have a shot. Obviously, Dallas is in an advantageous position up 2-1, but they do have a shot. Both teams have scored exactly 0.891 points per half-court play. So they're equally efficient in the half-court. Both teams have exactly 116 points in the paint. Both teams are shooting similar percentages. Dallas is at 53% true shooting percentage. Clippers at 54% true shooting percentage. The difference is the Mavs are dominating points off turnovers, 60-36. And they're dominating fast break points scored, which is obviously related to turnovers, 51-37. That's the difference in the series right now. Ball handling. Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic have just done a better job of taking care of the basketball, which is interesting, especially when you factor in the fact that the Clippers have been going with more aggressive coverages. Like those aggressive coverages just haven't paid off with turnovers the way that they've needed them to. So again, if you're the Clippers and you're looking for a kind of silver lining, take care of the ball, keep defending. You'll put yourself in a position to potentially tie the series in game 4. Here's what would scare me, though, if I was a Clippers fan. Watch out for Luka. He's been shooting the pull-up jump shot a lot, and he's been making it all season long, but he's just 18 for 52 so far on pull-up jumpers in the series, just 10 for 31 on pull-up threes, and he was close to 40% on those in the regular season. So if he catches a heater, especially like if Dallas somehow pulls out game 4 in ugly fashion and then he catches a heater in game 5, you could be out of here quickly. That's always a risk on the table here. I want to credit the Clippers defense. They've played really good defense, but Luka is capable of getting on a hot streak with those shots. And if he does, that could close the door sooner than later. But I'm going to stick with my prediction from before the series. I think Dallas is going to win this thing in 6. Obviously a Luka heater away from potentially ending it in 5, but I do want to be clear for the Clippers fans out there. I still think you guys have a really good chance to win this series. All right, Pacers-Bucks. Super weird game again. The Pacers shot really poorly again, 0.796 points per jump shot. And yet the Bucks had like a blistering hot shooting game, especially on pull-up jump shots. The Bucks got 47 points on 33 pull-up jump shots. That's 1.42 points per pull-up jumper. So to give you some perspective, the Pacers, who've been a top 5 jump shooting team all season, got about half as many points per shot out of all their jumpers as the Bucks got just on their tough contested pull-up jump shots. So just a really, really good shooting night for the Milwaukee Bucks. The Pacers missed 6 wide open threes in the fourth quarter and in overtime. That's the defender at least 6 feet away. Halliburton missed 3 of them, and then Turner, Nembhard, and Nesmith each missed 1. Nesmith's been good at them all season. Turner and Nembhard are like just under 40% on those, so like some unfortunate shooting for the Pacers, but the shot quality difference in the game for like the whole game was wild. The Pacers generated 33 wide open threes with a defender at least 6 feet away. The Bucks generated 9. So they literally generated almost 4 times as many wide open threes as the Bucks did. And because they shot so poorly on them, it was a game late. Chris Middleton and Dame are the guys you got to tip the hat to. And it was like, man, like Dame kind of gets a little banged up early in the game. And obviously Giannis is out. There's so many reasons to feel like that thing's over, especially after the Pacers outscored them by 19 in the first quarter. But Chris Middleton and Dame combined to go 11 for 24 on pull-up jump shots. They combined to go 7 for 14 on pull-up threes. Dame hit a couple of massive ones at the beginning of the fourth quarter that got the game close again. Chris Middleton, the shot that he hit that sent it to OT was just completely ridiculous. He hit another one off the catch at the end of OT that almost sent it to a double overtime. Just really a gutty performance from those guys. So I want to tip the cap to Chris Middleton and Damian Lillard, but it was all for naught. Despite the two prayers from Chris Middleton, both of them were really cool plays too. Like, so it was a dribble hand. The one at the end of regulation was a dribble handoff with Brook Lopez. Miles Turner threw a hard hedge. And on the hedge, remember the hedge is designed to cut off the driving lane. So Chris had to go around the hedge. And Nesmith relaxed at the worst possible time. He ran up to the screen and he thought Turner was going to cut him off and force him to come back the other way. And so he kind of let up for a second. And so Chris was able to come off when he turned the corner around Turner. Nesmith wasn't there yet. He was late to close out. And so he was able to elevate and knock that shot down. I'm trying to remember, what was the huge game-tying three that Chris Middleton hit from a similar spot? I was having a really hard time remembering it. Someone can drop it in the comments. But like, he hit a very similar shot, kind of a prayer from 30 feet, kind of right by the sideline on the right wing in a different series. And I'm having a hard time remembering what it was, but he's hit a similar shot to that. And I wonder if he derived confidence for this shot from that shot to send the game to OT. The one at the end of OT was a really interesting kind of like wrinkle of stagger pick and roll. So essentially they had Dame with the ball. Chris Middleton set the first screen. Brook set the second screen. Dame comes off both, but then Brook just turns around and screens Chris as he comes back to the top of the key. Got just enough separation. Miles Turner had a really nice peel off switch where he identified it and left Brook and came back and got a really good contest and actually forced Chris into a kind of a funky release, but he banked it in and tied the game. But a really, really smart play design from Rick Carlisle when it was tied at 118. You'll notice there was no pressure, but they threw the ball way into the backcourt on purpose. There was about 6 seconds left, and they threw the ball way into the backcourt so that Tyrese Halliburton could have a running start, like a legit runway coming down the floor. And so then Siakam comes up, and he's about to set a screen just after half court, right? And so Tyrese just gives a little fake to the screen, but then he counters away from the screen to reject the screen. Pat Bev identifies it, takes a really hard slide step back to his left to cut off Tyrese, and then Tyrese whipped it back across with the crossover and just dusted Pat. Got downhill. There was a show, I think from Andre Jackson Jr., if I remember correctly. It was someone came over to help, and Pat Bev came in from behind and fouled him, but he elevated and knocked down the floater. First big playoff moment for Tyrese Halliburton. I thought it was fitting too that it came from him as a scorer, because that's something that he's been criticized for in this series, is being a little too passive in terms of his shooting. And honestly, for him too, I'm sure he was frustrated because he missed some great looks down the stretch of that game. Like I said, he missed 3 wide open threes in the fourth quarter and overtime, but he hits the big one to put the Bucks up 2-1 in the series. Then we get the report today, unfortunately, that Dame at the end of the fourth quarter strained his Achilles and is likely out for game 4. Which means this series is likely over, right? No Dame, no Giannis. Pacers are probably going to lose this series, right? So I want to look at it from 2 fronts. First, the Pacers. Obviously, they got to close the deal. But interestingly enough, looking at the matchups, I was just kind of briefly thinking, putting myself in the brain space of that second round series. I actually think they should prefer to play Philly. Philly has been the worst transition defense in the playoffs by far so far. And just Indy can play with a ton of speed. I think they can fatigue Joel Embiid a little bit. And I just think that's a matchup that really plays into their advantages. I think the Knicks are a rough matchup for the Pacers. They're physical and they're tough. They're the best offensive rebounding team in the league, and the Pacers have been a bottom 5 defensive rebounding team in the league. And even if you go back post Siakam, they've still been bottom 10 in defensive rebounding, although they have rebounded well against Milwaukee. I want to credit the Pacers. They've rebounded well against Milwaukee. But they're physical and tough. OG Anunoby is actually like a good matchup for Siakam, and he can guard him better than probably any Bucks player can. So like, I just think it kind of plays a little bit more into some of Indiana's weaknesses. So if I'm Indiana, I'm rooting for Philly over the course of the next week. On the Bucks front, I know it seems bleak. I mean, this season has been a complete and utter disaster, right? You fired your coach midseason. You hired Doc. That whole thing was weird. Dame had a down year compared to where he was in Portland the year before. The Dame-Giannis chemistry just like never really popped. And then both guys got hurt and you're losing in round one. So I get it. It's rough. But I actually have a little bit more of a glass half full perspective with the Bucks. Dame's going to be 34 next year. That's older, but that's perfectly reasonable to expect that he's still going to be a top 15 player in the league next year, right? And he flashed his playoff upside in a big way in this playoff run, really got the pull-up three-point shot going, and that was something he really couldn't get going in the regular season. I think another year of the Dame-Giannis chemistry will be valuable. Like Jokic said, I thought this was really smart, and like this is something I've been thinking more about, and I talked with Colin Cowherd in last Sunday's show. Like, as the league has gotten more athletic and more perimeter-oriented, read and react has become a huge factor in success for these teams, right? Especially as defensive coverages have figured out how to get the ball out of your stars' hands more frequently. And so as a result of that, you need high IQ and you need chemistry. And chemistry comes from time and reps. And like Jokic said, like it takes 2 or 3 years to learn how to play with each other. And I thought that was super fascinating. And so another year of Dame-Giannis chemistry will be nice and valuable, especially with some stability at head coach, with Doc having a full training camp to kind of implement what he wants to implement. And you know what you need to fix. You need to get more athletic on the perimeter. That's the key, right? You can go out this summer and you can reconfigure the roster. And the big thing is when you have 2 players like Dame and Giannis, when you have players like Dame and Giannis, you create small, achievable roles for role players. And so you can target specialists in a way that you couldn't otherwise target specialists. Now, I'm not saying target specialists. I'm just saying you can target players that are all-around players, but where their strengths kind of line up into these specific smaller roles that are generated by what Dame and Giannis do, right? You don't need a guy who can run action. You don't need a guy that can be the low man. Giannis is your low man. You need perimeter athletes that can attack closeouts and defend in space. If you get a couple of guys like that, that can go a long way towards making the Bucks a more formidable threat next year. This is not over. I know it seems bleak, but it is not over for the Bucks. All right, guys, that is all I have for this morning, or I should say this afternoon. I'll be back about after the final buzzer of Lakers Nuggets tonight for a breakdown of all 4 of today's games. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you then.